We flew Cathay Pacific via Heathrow and Hong Kong to Auckland, taking about 36 hours altogether. The family live near Browns Bay, and we've rented an apartment in the Bacchus Apartments block for 6 weeks. And that's our apartment, our home for the next 6 weeks. The apartment is ideally located for all the amenities of Browns Bay, which include more than 30 cafes. We'd promised ourselves Christmas Day on the beach, and even though the weather on Christmas Day wasn't typical for a New Zealand midsummer, we did insist on going down there. Later on in the day, James and Jack have got kayaks for Christmas, so they had to be tested out on Waiheke Beach. Later on, it's a family Christmas meal at Sue and Glenn's house. The Saturday after Christmas, and we all head up to Tafanui for a day on the beach. Almost time to leave for home. A little bit north of the Torbay area is the Whangaparoa Peninsula, and we went for a look round there one day. This is Manly, quite a pleasant village with one decent cafe, not as good as Browns Bay. This is Big Manly Beach, as opposed to Little Manly Beach, of course. A splendid pohutakawa tree, still in full flower. Further along the peninsula is Gulf Harbour, where in recent years this marina has been rapidly developing. A typically New Zealand camper van. Gulf Harbour faces south, so we get views of Auckland city centre and the bays round Browns Bay and Long Bay. Near the tip of the peninsula is Army Bay. A very gnarled pohutakawa tree. Shakespeare Regional Park. All of Auckland's regional parks have one of these picture frames, so you can put yourself in the view. This one also has a strategically placed flat post, so you can put your camera there and film yourself. It's New Year's Eve, which means it's also Joe's birthday.
Happy birthday to you. That's what James said. Happy birthday to you. Oh, make a wish. It was a big wish. It was.
What was the wish?
Two.
Oh, I didn't know.
It's channel 20 on that TV. It's music, I think.
How do you know?
They've got
Why did you get the white Christmas tree?
Channel 20.
because it's white.
Really?
I think it's brilliant.
It seems as if no family celebration is complete without a game of Pass the Parcel.
No. Really? I won. No, I didn't win. I did win $2.
It's ginger liqueur. I've never heard of it, so I thought I'll try that.
Oh, it's poison. It kills people.
It's New Year's Day at the races, and we're all off to Ellerslie Racecourse in Auckland. It's a brilliantly sunny day, and you're allowed to bring practically anything you like marquees and gazebos to keep the sun off. Before each race, you can go and see the horses parading. We've got our money on this one, number 10, in the next race. And they're off. As they pass us the first time, number 10 seems to be in third place. Now number 10 is in second place, but as they gallop towards the finishing post, number 10 just noses ahead. And here's our horse with its lady jockey being led away to the winner's enclosure. A drive over to the west coast and a visit to Waitakere Regional Park. It's got another one of those picture frames. The Waitakere River. We're looking down on Piha Beach, one of the best surfing beaches in the area. There's a strong local protest movement against plans to mine the black sand which contains iron ore from the seabed around here. Rose Hellaby's house and the characteristic sound of a tui. On a good day, you can see the whole of Auckland from here. Lunch at the Riverhead Inn, and this place has been completely made over since we were last here. Very smart now. The river is actually the headwaters of the Waitemata Harbour, and you can sail up here from Auckland. Back at the Bacchus Apartments, we're taking the cover off the swimming pool. Considering I never actually learned to swim, I don't think I'm doing too badly here. But Joe does considerably better. We're going on a day trip to Waiheke Island, and this starts with a ferry ride from Auckland. We've got up early and used the ordinary service bus to get into central Auckland. We arrived far too early, of course. As the ferry time approaches, a long queue begins to form, and here we are on our way, passing Shed 10, which is being redeveloped into a second cruise terminal. And that's Oceanic Discoverer, a small luxury cruise ship based in Australia. After calling in at Devonport to pick up more passengers, we're passing the naval base, and a good view of Auckland city centre. Waiheke Island, about the same size as Manhattan, is about 10 miles from Auckland. We're booked with Around Waiheke Tours on their wine and beer tour, which will take us to 3 wineries. We were taken for a quick look round before heading off to our first winery, which was Peacock Sky. Then it was our lunch break, which we took at Onatangi Beach. We had our lunch in Charlie Farley's, which is apparently a kind of local institution. While we were there, this boat with its own undercarriage drove up the street and onto the beach. After lunch, the next stop was Wild on Waiheke, which was basically homebrewed beer, and then finally the Goldie Vineyard. Another day out exploring, and we find ourselves in Birkenhead. Seems strangely familiar. There's the ferry terminal, and there's a ferry every hour to the city. Driving towards the town centre, these houses don't seem so familiar.
A charm from the skies seems to hallow us there, which seek through the world is near met with elsewhere. Home, sweet, sweet home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
The tree ferns, the Norfolk pines, and the Sky Tower tell me I'm not in the Wirral anymore. We move on to Devonport, which it turns out isn't on the south coast of England, but on the north shore of Waitemata Harbour. Many North Shore residents can use the ferry to get into Auckland city centre. These woolly covers on the colonnade pillars were a sort of art installation. We're heading back to Browns Bay via some of the bays on the east coast. There are some older, traditional style New Zealand houses along here. Another day, and we're driving into Auckland. Crossing the bridge, and we're driving on one of the 2 lanes on either side, which were clipped on to the existing bridge about 10 years after it was originally built. In Auckland now, passing the Viaduct Harbour area. Just past the cruise terminal, and now passing the ferry terminal. We're heading for the bays along the south shore of the harbour. First stop will be Mission Bay. The view dominated by Rangitoto Island. Achilles Point is named after Her Majesty's New Zealand ship Achilles, which fought in the Battle of the River Plate in the Second World War, and it's a memorial to those who died in that action. Back to the city centre now, and we're revisiting Victoria Park Market. This has been the subject of a major rebuilding and renovation since we were last here, which is roughly 50% complete now. It was very quiet, not very busy at all when we were there. Today we're heading to the west coast again. Firstly to Muriwai. There's a long stretch of beach of black sand. Walkways have been installed so that you can get close to the gannet colony. This colony first established itself in the early 20th century, firstly on the small island out there that you can see, then on the stack nearer to land about 1975, and then in the late 70s on the mainland. The colony consists of 1,200 breeding pairs, and each pair raises 1 chick a year. The chicks hatch out in December, and by March they fly away. Some humans trying to imitate the gannets, I think. This, I think, is a uniquely New Zealand thing, a used house lot. You can have a house taken away from its existing position and relocated somewhere else, or, as in this case, stored for selling later to somebody else.
This old house is a-getting shaky, this old house is a-getting old. This old house lets in the rain, this old house lets in the cold. Oh, his knees are a-getting chilly, but he feels no fear of pain, 'cause he sees an angel peeking through a broken window pane.
Next stop is Bethel's Beach, and the cafe was quite a welcome stop. It's a long walk down to the water's edge. There's a very large lifeguard presence on this beach, which is not surprising because it is actually quite dangerous and only for experienced and strong swimmers. A sunny afternoon round Sue Glen's pool.
Ready?
Heading north this time towards Warkworth and Matakana. Warkworth has this pleasant boardwalk along the bank of the Mahurangi River. The town used to be important in the cement manufacturing industry. The Jane Gifford is New Zealand's last remaining rigged sailing scow and used to carry cargo along the rivers of New Zealand. It's now been restored as a pleasure craft. Just a few miles away is Matakana, which is the centre of a local winemaking industry. There are some trendy shops and restaurants, and it's become a sort of foodie destination for Aucklanders. There's a pleasant riverside walk on the Matakana River. Stopping off on the way back to look at the Puhoi River and our trusty Hyundai Getz from Juicy Rentals. Heading north again, this time to Sandspit, from where we're going to take the Royal Mail cruise to Kauai Island. Low tide at Sandspit. The dog is a detection dog trained to sniff out Argentine ants, which are an invasive species round here. The film crew are making a documentary about him and his handler. First stop on the mail run. This is where the dog, who's called Rhys Jones by the way, gets off together with his entourage. Next stop. We're now approaching the Yacht Club. Vital supplies for the yachties. The chimney is from the pump house from a copper mine that used to be active here, but is no more. We're coming into Mansion House Bay. The Mansion House was extended by Sir George Grey, who was an early governor of New Zealand. We have time ashore here. Time to look around. This is Ladies' Bay. Gandalf and Radagast with their wizard staffs. Here's our boat coming back to collect us and take us back to Sandspit. We've reached the end of our 6-week stay at the Bacchus Apartments and we're about to head up north. And there's a party and barbecue going on for all the residents. We're heading to the far north, to Kerikeri on the Bay of Islands. We're staying at the Avalon Resort. which has a mixture of 4 cottages and 3 studio apartments in 7 acres of ground. We're in the Emerald studio apartment. Avalon is a family business headed up by Willem, and the family own various pets, including a flock of ducks which have insatiable appetites and keep coming up and trying to get fed, and pigs, goats and sheep. Kerry Kerry is for the most part a modern town, servicing not only the tourist industry but also the local farming industry. There are a number of cafes and restaurants, and in this mall there's even an Israeli restaurant which we patronised, and it was very good indeed. But there is a very historical part to Kerry Kerry as well. Down on the Kerry Kerry Inlet are New Zealand's oldest stone building and oldest wooden building. The stone store was built between 1832 and 1836, originally as a storehouse for the mission. But the mission house, also known as the Kemp House, is even older, dating from 1821 to 1822, and is the oldest building in New Zealand. Originally built to house the Anglican missionaries, the house passed into the hands of the Kemp family, who continued to live there until the 1970s. The stone store also passed out of the hands of the missionaries and eventually into the hands of the Kemp family, who ran it as a store until the 1970s. It's still a store, but for tourist things now. Across the road is the excellent Pear Tree Restaurant and Cafe. It's named after the oldest pear tree in New Zealand, planted in 1819 and still bearing fruit. Up the hill is St James's Church. The first chapel on this site was built in 1829, but this structure dates mainly from the 1870s. Nearby is Rewa's village, a reconstructed Maori village as it might have been at the time that the first Europeans arrived here. Near the cafe, a family of chickens out looking for food. I wonder if they have fresh eggs at the cafe. About a mile away, Rainbow falls on the Kerry Kerry River. The drop is only 27 metres, but there are some pleasant walks around this area. A scenic drive to some of the bays and beaches northeast of Kerry Kerry. Matori Bay and the Cavalli Islands in the background. The wreck of the Rainbow Warrior was sunk here to form an artificial reef. Tengeri Bay. In New Zealand, you have to collect your mail from roadside mailboxes, which can lead to some interesting photographic compositions. Tauranga Bay. Whangaroa Harbour. A coach trip to Cape Reinga, the far northwest tip of New Zealand, and first we get to drive along 90 Mile Beach. The tide is coming in, and sometimes the coach got splashed quite a bit by the waves. A photo stop just to prove we all did it. Next stop, sandboarding, for those who want to take part. The bus brought with it enough sandboards for everybody. No injuries this time, but somebody had died of a heart attack the week before. Cape Reinga, which marks the northwest point in the North Island of New Zealand and officially the demarcation between the Pacific Ocean and the Tasman Sea. That's where the waters of the Tasman Sea to the left and the Pacific Ocean to the right meet. Our lunch stop was on Doubtless Bay, so named by Captain Cook, who apparently said, "Doubtless it's a bay." On our way back, we stop to view some kauri trees in the middle of a forest. This species is endemic to the north of New Zealand and can grow to over 50 metres height and can live for over 1,000 years. They are now under threat. The tourism hub for the Bay of Islands is the small town of Paihia. Just across there is Waitangi and the treaty grounds. Apart from being where you have to come to get ferries and other transports to get you to where you really want to be, there's not much reason to come to Paihia. That restaurant, however, is a very good one. And from that jetty you get the ferry to this jetty on the peninsula opposite, which is Russell. This is the oldest European settlement in New Zealand and was once known as the hellhole of the South Pacific. The Pompeii Mansion was built by French Catholic missionaries in the early 1840s, and from here they tried to convert as many Maori as possible by printing Bibles and so on. The Anglican Church, Christ Church, is the oldest church in New Zealand, dating in its oldest parts from 1836. Buried here are victims of fighting with the Maori from an incident in 1845, as well as prominent Maori who supported the British. What to do on a wet day in Kerry Kerry? Well, one thing is to visit Pete's Motor Museum, which has got a wonderful collection of cars, some very old and some not so old, but most of them very well preserved. Another wet day, and it's our only chance to do the cruise to the Hole in the Rock with dolphin watching. No chance of sailing through the Hole in the Rock in these conditions. A stop for refreshments in Otihai Bay on Urupukapuka Island. There's a cafe here and some basic accommodation for people who want to use the island for walking and water sports. Heading back now and passing Carnival Spirit, which hasn't had the best of days for its visit to the Bay of Islands. Another quiet day in Kerry Kerry, and a visit to a garden centre that specialises in tree ferns. A few miles inland from Kerry Kerry, another mission station, this one Te Waimati. It's actually the second oldest building in New Zealand after the mission house in Kerry Kerry itself. Another simple small church. And the ornate grave of a Maori chief. Our 7 weeks in New Zealand are coming to an end, so we say goodbye for now to Long Bay and get ready to fly across for a week in Western Australia.